market right now, specifically for the job profiles like business analyst, data analyst, and product analyst. So any of the jobs which require some analysis or working with data of any kind would require you to learn a data visualization tool, and Microsoft Power BI is one of the most important ones in the market right now and one of the most in demand as well. So today we are going to be discussing what are the best practices when you are going to be creating reports with respect to Power BI. So what are the most important practices that you should follow in order to be more professional and industry ready. But before we get into all of that, please subscribe to our channel to never miss an update from Intellipaat. Now, let's talk about today's agenda. Today's agenda is very simple, short, and fourfold. We'll be starting off with what is Power BI, a brief introduction to what it is and how it works. And from there, we'll directly jump on to the topic on the hand today, which is the best practices on Power BI, where we'll be discussing what are the best practices. And to give it a number, we're going to be discussing 12 different aspects that you must keep in mind while you're creating a Power BI report. From there, we'll move on and talk about what are the further learning things with respect to where you can learn more about Power BI or other technologies, how you can go about learning this. So that will be a third section. And in the fourth section, which is the Q&A session. So this section, mind you guys, whoever is watching on YouTube, we have a session running on webinar as well, where we have a course advisor available for us with us today, and he will be taking all of your questions. So if you have any queries, and if you want to ask one-on-one question, if you want to get your doubts clarified, I would recommend you to move to the webinar session, and I would be requesting the person handling the chat right now to please provide the link to the webinar. So towards the end of this session, we will be closing the YouTube side and we'll be moving our Q&A to the webinar exclusively. So that is the agenda for today's session, guys. So without wasting any further time, let's just get into the session. So what is Power BI? So as I mentioned before, right? So Power BI is a data visualization tool. So this is, to put in basic definition terms, what I would say is Power BI is a business intelligence platform which basically provides you with the tools required for aggregating, analyzing, visualizing, as well as sharing the data. So what it basically does is it's basically helps you to load some data from some point. Let's say it could be MySQL, or it could be Excel, or some other sources. So basically any different kinds of sources that you have of collecting data. So wherever you have mapped your data, you can take those information from there. Then you can put it to this amazing tool which can help you transform the data and model the data based on your requirements. So if, let's say, you have some data with respect to some amounts and you want to calculate the standard deviation or different things that you can do with respect to a data, you can apply so many statistical formulas and you can basically transform your data, let's say whatever the raw data that you get, right? So no company basically will be directly using the raw data, right? So they would be converting it into metrics that they want to use. So you can convert the data that you have into useful metrics and then have reports based on that, and you can make different kinds of judgment based on those reports, and you can do that easily with the help of Power BI. So basically this will be taking the data. Let's say I have an Excel sheet full of information, right? So full of information is there on an Excel sheet. What I can do is I can load that data on my Power BI, transform that data into useful metrics, then model that data into one particular fashion that I want to. Then based on the particular requirements on what the fields are that I want to display, I can have visualized reports in the form of, let's say, dashboards, charts, pie charts, and different kinds of charts which are out there. And I can basically turn my data, which is, let's say, just numbers or statistical formulas, into something which my stakeholders can follow. Why is it important? So let's imagine you are going to a board meeting, right? So in your board meeting, let's say if you're meeting someone who does not have technical capabilities or isn't, let's say, a statistician or a mathematics god, right? So he is just someone who knows how the business runs. He knows how the business runs and what is the different metrics. He knows how the product sells, but he has no idea as to why you are predicting some things are going to happen. So in order to convince them in the board meeting, you have to show them statistics, right? So nobody will be going just on your word. You need to provide them with statistics. Now if I imagine a business meeting where I'm just saying that, okay, this is important because these are the numbers, and the numbers which are from past year is 1.25, and I'm displaying 1.25 and let's say 1.45 on the screen. It doesn't look that much intuitive. You cannot gain a lot of knowledge from it. You do not know what the data is telling you. So that is where reporting comes into picture. So having a visualized form of data is important for your stakeholders. So these are the stakeholders who are responsible for making different kinds of decisions, and they want to know what is going on in the company. And with the help of these reports and charts, you basically allow them to understand what is going on, and whatever the analysis that you have performed, what is the data telling you, you can do that through these graphs, and you can basically share these reports across domains and basically work with it. So that is how basically Power BI works and why we are using Power BI. Which job roles are these very important to? As I mentioned before, these are very important for anyone who is looking to look into the job profiles of business analysts, a product analyst, data analyst, or any person who does reporting or analysis of any kind. Uh, and another set of people who should know this kind of information is data scientists. So if you're looking to learn data scientist, data visualization is a very key part of it. So if you could be using Power BI for the same. So again, this could be a good factor if you're looking to become a data scientist as well. So any domain which requires working with data and analysis of that data to produce some kind of results would be requiring a data visualization tool, and that tool is Power BI for now, right? So let's move along to the best practices. So again, these will be pretty much straightforward. Could seem intuitive. Like a lot of people would think that these things might be intuitive. Some of these factors, of course, they are, but a lot of times we tend to forget because again, the speed at which you have to work, sometimes these things get missed. But as you go along, if you just keep these things in mind and work with it in the starting of phase of your career, then you will be applying it everywhere. So this is following the best practices is a very important part of being a professional. And being the professional, it's expected that from your work that you are following the best practices. For example, this belongs to domain wide, right? So it does not really apply just to the data analyst. Let's say if you are a programmer, people would want certain standard of code out there. Nobody would be expecting you to write random codes with let's say a variable a is equal to something. They don't want it. The code should be standardized. It should look properly indented so that anyone who does not even know programming, if he is going through your program, he should be able to understand what is going on. Certain standards are expected, and those standards are set by the best practices. And if you go into any good organization, they would be expecting you to perform with the best practices which are out there. So let's quickly dive into our facts for today on the best practices. So the first one on our hand here is, now again, this is an interesting one. It means the first best practice that you should follow is restrict the number of visuals on in your dashboards and reports. Now, as I said, data visualization is important, but if you just fill in the entire report with just visualizations of every kind and they are packed up in the one location, that would be a big problem. And according to Microsoft themselves, for the they have produced this optimization guide for Power BI. They themselves say that placing many visuals in a single report basically slows down the report performance. So that is one of the problems that you will have while creating a report which has a lot of visualization aspects in one place, right? So what they would want you to do is limit the number of widgets which are visuals to no more than 8 per report page, and grids to no more than 1 per report page, and this is as per the Microsoft's guideline. And you can limit the number of pages to no more than 30 points. So cards would be 1, gauges would be 2, charts would be 3, maps would be 3, and grids would be 5. I'll repeat the number again. The card should be 1, gauges should be 2, charts should be 3, maps should be 3, and grid should be 5, right? And you should also limit the tiles to no more than 10 per dashboard. So these are the basic guidelines which are provided by Microsoft themselves. So this is something that you should follow by standard. So limiting and restricting the number of visuals in your dashboard reports is important for the efficient functioning of the tool that you are using, as well as for the sake of your stakeholders. A lot of information at one go is also not uh, let's say not very appealing. So let's say if, for example, if I were to put this image, that's the screen that you are seeing, with entirely full of text or full of graphs, you won't be able to understand what is going on. You need certain kind of finesse to whatever the report that you are producing, right? So there should be clarity, there should be cleanliness about whatever you are producing, and that you can do by restricting the number of visuals in the dashboard. right? The next one is you need to remove the unnecessary interactions between the visuals, right? So this is again this a lot of people know this. Whoever is working with Power BI, they know this, that by default all of the visuals which are present on a report page can interact with one another. And basically, for having an optimal performance of your Power BI, it is recommended that you should modify and control these interactions between whatever the visuals that you are keeping on your report page. It is basically recommended that you do that by default. And reducing the number of queries, uh, this interaction that they are having, this basically what it does is basically impacts your backend. So backend is where your database is there, right? So these interactions between the visuals basically send a lot of queries to your database. So imagine one person is there, he's answering all of your questions, he has all of the information, and you're constantly pinging him for questions again and again and again and again and again, right? So what will that do? It will basically make the entire process slower. It will make him inefficient, that you're constantly pinging him and there is no time to think about it. So if there are so many questions along the way, some questions will be getting answered slowly, right? In the similar fashion, the number of queries that you are firing with these unnecessary interactions is too much. So reducing the number of queries fired at the backend to improve the performance can be achieved by basically disabling the unwanted activities or interaction between these visuals, right? So next one is provide data categorizations for Power BI reports. In the bracket that says HBI, MBI, and LBI, which basically corresponds to high business impact, medium business impact, and low business impact. So HBI, MBI, and LBI is the basically are the kinds of reports which are segregated on the basis of the impact that it has on the business. So high business impact data requires the users to get some policy exceptions to share the data externally, right? So and low and medium businesses do not have that kind of an exception policy, so you do not indulge in that scenario. But whenever you're using Power BI, the sensitivity levels are very important. So you must raise the awareness to the user about the security of the data. So let's say if I am using certain kind of data which is very sensitive, or so it cannot be shared publicly, right? So you can share the reports in Power BI, as I mentioned before, and some data which is shared even in the organization also should not be known to everyone. So there is certain level of security and abstraction that you have to provide within the organization itself while dealing with different kinds of information. So if it is something which impacts the business highly, it should only be available to those people who are at that level to uh, know about these information, and not to the people who are not responsible for it. So basically having those categorization for data of these kinds is important for this respect. Let's say if we are working with some confidential information about, let's say, the business is going down heavily due to something, if this might happen, you do not want that to be known to company wide. You would want that to be known to the people who are making the decision, so that they can alter something and make better results, or they can work on that problem. And outside, if it gets leaked and the public starts shaming you, it could be different problem altogether, right? So having that kind of and segregation with respect to the data, or abstraction with respect to the data, is very important in that scenario. Let's move forward and talk about the next one, which is the test the performance of each custom visual on a report. So first and foremost, it is recommended that you only use the custom visuals which are Microsoft approved. Do not use anything random which is out there when you are working with company data. It could be it could have some kind of glitches or something which is which you may not expect it to do, or maybe it could be some kind of a virus or anything. I'm just speculating out here. Just use those standard things which are available when you are working with company information, right? So use only those custom visuals which are approved by Microsoft. And again, whenever you're using, let's say, these custom visuals as well, so you might be thinking that these would be doing great, but sometimes it would happen that based on your data and the way that you are using the data, these visuals might not perform up to the scratch that you want to, right? So basically uncertified custom visuals are not thoroughly tested by the Power BI teams, so they might perform very poorly, or the complex aggregations would be there which are not working well for you. So test the performance of each and every individual custom visual when you are using it. And let's say if when you're testing it says it is providing more of an impact that you'd want, that it is making the performance slower than you'd actually want it to be. In those scenarios, look for certain kinds of alternatives to those visuals, so that uh, it is important, so that you basically maintain the performance, because it is very important that you maintain the efficiency with respect to the Power BI application that you are using, right? So the next one is again a very simple one: use the on-premise gateway. It is recommended that you use the on-premise gateway rather than the simple one, because for the simple fact that when you use it on the if you do not use the on-premise gateway, it starts to load certain kind of information which basically slows down the entire process, while using the on-premise one, it does not use those is does not uh, get those information or download the information, so it basically makes the entire process faster. So it is always recommended that you use on-premise gateway, right? So from that, let's move to the next one, which is import only the necessary fields from the tables instead of the entire data sets. Again, something which is very straightforward and important, but a lot of people commit this basic mistake all the time. So let's say I have a sheet full of information. So let's say if you are a computer, how do you go about processing all of that? It does not have the infinite capability to process that information all the time, right? So it does not, it's not something which is fully competent to do everything. So what you want to do in that scenario is to make the entire process more efficient, and the way to do it more efficient is to provide just the data that it needs, rather than giving it, let's say, a huge chunk of data with, say, lakhs of rows is out there, and you just want it to search through it. That would make the process slower. So if there is, let's say, if you just need from the image, if you can see on the right hand side, if you just need the first row which is highlighted in green, if you just need that information just provided with those fields and only those tables which have those information, so that it makes the process faster, rather than it having to search through, let's say, n number of tables for the information that it needs, just basically makes the entire process slower. So it is again something which is very intuitive and easy to understand, but a lot of times, for the sake of their own let's say easiness, people tend to just load the entire data sets and just blame the Power BI. But if you would apply a little bit of more time and effort on that, you could just provide it with the tables and the fields that it needs, then the entire impact on the Power BI's efficiency would be much more. So it will be much more efficient if you just give it the data that it needs, right? So let's move forward. And the next one is use the report tooltip pages to provide more context with respect to the highlighted measure. So if you have, let's say, any highlighted measure, if you want to provide more context to it, you should be using a report tooltip. So basically, report tooltips are a great way of sharing additional information on the entire metric. So what you'd want to do with respect to that also, let's say if you are using the report tooltip also, what you'd want to do is use limited number of visuals also in there, because that is our rule one. If when we started with this live, that is the rule one, to use the limited number of visuals. Do the same when you're using the report tooltip as well, and ensure that you select the tooltip field very carefully. So you have two certain kinds of things that you can choose in front of it, right? So it could be a categorical tooltip, and the other could be the measure. So based on the requirement, you can basically choose. While choosing it, you have to be more careful about what kind of it is. So whenever you're using a tooltip also, it is important that you keep in mind while using what kind of measure you are choosing. And the other one is the simple fact that you can give more context in there rather than writing it anywhere else. You can use tooltip to provide those information. Next one is again a very simple one. If it says that use the names that would be meaningful to your audience. So this audience could be the other business users that you are talking about. It could be the stakeholders that you are presenting the information to. It could be some other business meeting that you are going to. It could be anyone, right? So what you want by that is, let's say this goes for anyone also working in any professional field. Let's say if you were a programmer also, so people who do programming would be able to relate. So let's say if I start writing an entire code and I use variables like a, b, x, x, y, and things like this, where the variable name does not tell me what is going on, it would be very hard for anyone to understand what is actually going on. So let's say if you have just a field, let's say its name, it's a field which gives you the name, right? It could be a simple. So in there also you want to give meaningful names. So what is the name of, so let's say sports names, or it could be courses names, or different things like that. So there also get information. If you just write names in this one and names in the next field also, it does not make sense. People won't be able to understand what is going on. So for the sake of the people who are watching your reports, because the whole point of providing data visualization is to save a lot of time, to get your points across very easily and more intuitively, so that people would be able to understand what is going on. In the interest of keeping that alive, what you would want to do is provide meaningful names to your audience, so that is very easy for them to understand what is going on, and they would be able to interpret the entire information in a much more efficient fashion, right? And with the next one, and this is the final one that we'll be discussing with you. So this is again, you can avoid a lot of scrolls on your visual page. So again, nobody likes to scroll a lot here and there, so you'd want your entire piece of information that you are providing to be very optimized. So, and for that, try to avoid a lot of scrolling on your pages, make it more efficient for the entire pages. And that is about some simple practices that you can do. Some other things that you might want to keep in mind is that you can use something called as a query reduction, which basically reduces the number of query sent by Power BI uh, by using the certain things which is called, for settings for slicers and filters, you can basically reduce the amount of query which is being sent by Power BI. So you can use query reduction, is another tip that I'll give you. Another thing that you can follow is you can use the drill through button to generate an intuitive user experience. So basically you can enable these buttons, which basically gives you more drill down information with respect to uh, any information that you're working with. It makes your data points more intuitive. And you can use conditional formatting to make the text on the button context driven. So you can basically, let's say if I click on there, you can just provide more information there. Like if I click on one particular data point, I can have that button pop up on the bottom which says see more details with respect to this data point, and you can just click on that button and get more data. So that is something that, again, you can use. So this is another tip that you should be following. And with that, I think we are done with all the basic information that you would need. There are a few other things that you should keep in mind, like use certain light colors instead of dark ones, and that basically comes down to the personal preference, but these are the standard things that you must keep in mind. Let's talk about further learning. So if you were, let's say, more interested about learning in depth about what are more best practices, or trying out more different things with respect to Power BI or any other technologies, we at Intellipaat, we understand that an investment in knowledge always pays the best interest. That's why we provide a lot of free content which is available on our Intellipaat blogs and YouTube channel. So if you're interested about any technologies, you can go on either of these and find out more information on the particular technology that you're looking for. But if you want to, let's say, get more drill down approach and want to learn with us, there are other ways to join us as well. So if you can contact our personnel, so these details will be sharing towards the end of the live. But if you want to just learn and explore, these two are very good free platforms available for you to learn and get started with different technologies. And if whenever you find your interest and you want to get certified in it, then you can enroll with us on the particular topic as well. So with that, we have come to the end of this session on YouTube. So people who have some questions either on YouTube or webinar, we'll be taking some questions now on our webinar. We'll be posting again a link in the chat window. And those of you who do not want to attend that Q&A session, just want to talk to us about the different courses or any other doubts that you have, the numbers are on your screen. You can contact us any point of time that you want, or you can email us at the mentioned email on the screen at any point that you want, and we'll be happy to assist you with respect to anything. Now we will be moving on to the Q&A session on the webinar, and I have a colleague who is again a senior course advisor, again industry giant, industry expert in the field. He will be assisting you with all of the queries that you have. So let's quickly introduce him and get started with the Q&A.